Hey, sixth grade. Today is Wednesday, May the 6th. We're going to be doing Tom Sawyer, chapter 15. We're also going to be going over our journal, and we're going to be going over Monday night's homework as well. Let's get started. So, this week's standard is reading informational text 6.4, which means, first of all, informational text's three goals for the writer is to persuade, inform, or entertain. This week, you guys are going to be looking at word meanings and how those word meanings impact the tone of the author's message in the informational text, right? So, you've got 4 today to do, so in your Google Doc, number 1 to 4, and label it today's journal and today's date. So write the definition for each word. If it has a connotation, explain it. So remember, connotation and denotation. This is a review from, I think that was in our standard in the 3rd quarter. Connotation and denotation are, what again? Connotation, the feeling you get when you hear a word. Denotation is the dictionary definition. So when an author uses a lot of, let's say, negative connotation words in their writing, that'll give the writing a certain tone. It'll give the writing a negative tone, perhaps a sarcastic tone. It's all up to the writer and what kind of message they're wanting to convey to us, the readers. So today your 4 words are pioneer, curtailed, ephemerous, and correspondence. So you're going to have to look up on dictionary.com, or you can do a Google define search by typing define : and then the word, and or you can ask Siri, because I'm sure some of you will, or Alexa, whichever you're using. You can look up the definition of these words and then tell me if it has a positive connotation P or negative connotation N, or it has no connotation at all. Just write neutral, or you can write a plus, a minus, and the word neutral. So you're going to be reading about Benjamin Banneker today, and Benjamin Banneker was a pioneer in astronomy and civil rights. So you're going to read about him. You're going to use those words to kind of see how the author painted their picture of Benjamin Banneker. And then you're going to tell me if it has a negative, positive connotation. And then at the very end, I want you to tell me if the whole piece altogether was persuasive, inform, or entertain, and then tell me if it was positive, negative connotation, or neutral. Okay? Let me know if you guys have any questions. I'll be at a Google Meets today. Okay? Let's move on. Homework from Monday, chapter 14 of Tom Sawyer. Mark Twain uses a figure of speech. He says, nature shaking off sleep in this chapter. What is really happening and what is the figure of speech he used? First of all, we should know this. That's personification. Nature does not shake. It cannot shake things off. Nature is an inanimate object. So nature can't shake off sleep. And what's really happening is nature is starting to wake up, right? So Tom gets up before all the other boys because he's going to run away. He's getting too homesick, and Mark Twain starts really kind of painting the picture of how the sun's beginning to rise on the Mississippi, birds are starting to chirp, the wind's starting to blow, things are waking up. What 5 reasons does Twain give for the fish tasting so good to the boys? He says, first of all, there's nothing better than being able to cook something yourself. Here's the first. The second was they felt so good because they had just witnessed on the river. What they witnessed? They think they're dead. So the boys are so proud, they're puffing their chests up. Third thing, they caught the fish themselves, right? They caught the fish themselves. Fourth, they're surviving without adults. So not only do they think they're dead back in town, but now these boys are surviving on their own without the help of their Aunt Polly's or their parents or teachers or anything like that. And fifth and final is I think they're just super, super proud of the fact that they're doing this. They're stepping out on a ledge and they're doing this on their own. And they're pretending to be pirates nonetheless, so they feel great. In this chapter, all the boys start to feel homesick. Why don't they say anything about it? Which one of the boys does, however, put out a feeler. They don't say anything about it because, after all, pirates don't feel homesick, right? Pirates show no emotion. And which one of the boys decides to put out a feeler? That is Tom. Tom's like, yeah, it's getting kind of lonely out here, isn't it? And starts dropping little hints. Why was the cannon being shot over the water? Well, this is an odd sort of thing. Whenever someone drowned back in the 1800s, they would take a boat out on the water, and they'd have search boats on the side of it, like little canoes and kayaks. And the cannon, they'd shoot a blank cannon over, and what that did, wouldn't shoot a cannonball, just the rumble would send out a vibration under the boat, and anything that's lodged in the water, whether it be a bloated body or anything else, will come float to the top. That's the theory. However, that's why they did that. So they thought the boys had drowned. They were sending out these rumbles to try and bring the bodies back up. For whom were the townspeople looking? Tom, Joe, and Huck. They think they're dead. At the end of this chapter, Tom leaves the camp. Where is he going? Make a prediction. He is going to Aunt Polly's. Because the way we can make that prediction is by the foreshadowing of how Tom keeps thinking back to how his Aunt Polly is not angry at him anymore, just disappointed and heartbroken. And he can't live with that anymore. He feels like he's pulled this woman over the coals enough. All right, so let's go ahead and let's move on to chapter 15. Here we go. Pay attention today how Tom is changing. He's not as bad of a kid as we thought in chapter 1. He does have a conscience, and it eats at him a lot. A few minutes later, Tom was in the shoal water of the bar waiting for the Illinois shore. Before the depth reached his middle, he was halfway over. The current would permit no more waiting. Now, so he struck out confidently, swimming the remaining 100 yards. He swam quartering upstream, but still was swept downward rather faster than he expected. However, he reached the shore finally and drifted along until he found a low place and drew himself out. He put his hand on his jacket pocket and found a piece of bark safe, and then he struck through the woods, following the shore with streaming garments. Shortly before 10, he came out in an open place opposite the village. He saw a ferry boat lying in the shadow of the trees and the high bank. Everything was quiet under the stars. He crept down the bank, watching all his eyes, slipped into the water, swam 3 or 4 strokes, and climbed into the skiff that did yawl duty at the boat's stern. He laid himself down into the thwarts and waited, panting. Presently, the cracked bell tapped, and a voice gave the order to cast off. A minute or two later, the skiff's head was standing high up against the boat's swell, and the voyage was begun. Tom felt happy in his success, for he knew it was the boat's last trip for the night. At the end of a long 12 or 15 minutes, the wheel stopped, and Tom slipped overboard and swam ashore in the dusk, landing about 50 yards downstream out of danger or possible stragglers. He flew along unfrequented alleys and shortly found himself at his Aunt Polly's backyard fence. He climbed over and approached the L and looked in the string of the room window, for a light was burning there, and there sat his poor Aunt Polly, Mary, Joe Harper's mother, and Sid. They all were grouped together talking. They were at the bed, and the bed was between them and the door. Tom went to the door and began to softly lift the latch, and then he pressed gently to the door, yielded a crack. He continued pushing cautiously and quaking every time it creaked, till he judged he might squeeze through on his knees. So he put his head through and began, warily. "What makes the candle blow so?" said Aunt Polly. Tom hurried up. "Why is that door open? I believe. Why, of course it is. No end of the strange things happening now. Go along and shut that door, Sid." Tom disappeared under the bed just in time. He laid and breathed himself for a while, and then crept to where he could almost touch his aunt's foot. "But as I was saying," said Aunt Polly, "he weren't that bad of a child, just mischievous. Oh, just giddy. And a harum-scarum, you know. He weren't any more responsible than a colt. He never meant any harm to us, and he was the best-hearted boy there ever lived." And she began to cry. "It was so with Joe, always full of his devilment and up to every kind of mischief, but he was this so and unselfish, kind as he could be, and laws bless me to think I just whipped him for taking that cream. Never once recollected that I throwed it out myself, because it was sour, and I'd never to see him again in this world, never, that poor abused boy." And Mrs. Harper also sobbed as if her heart would break. "I hope Tom's better off where he is," said Sid. "But if he be better in some ways, Sid." Tom felt the glare of pain in the old lady's eyes, though he could not see it. Not a word against Tom now that he's gone. "Oh, God'll take care of him now. Never you trouble yourself, sir, oh Mrs. Harper. I don't know how to give him up. I don't know how to give him up. He was such a comfort to me, although he tormented my old heart. Oh, the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away, Miss Polly. Blessed be the name of the Lord. But it's so, oh, it's so hard. Only last Saturday, my poor Joe busted a firecracker right under my nose, and I knocked him to the floor sprawling. Little did I know then how soon. Oh, if I'd do it over again, I'd hug him and bless him for it." "Oh, I know just how you feel, Miss Harper," said Aunt Polly. "I know just exactly how you feel. No longer than yesterday, Tom took and filled out a cat full of my painkillers. I did think the creature would tear the house down, and God forgave me. I cracked Tom's head with a thimble. Poor boy, he's dead now. But he's out of his troubles of this world, and the last words I ever heard him say was to reproach." But this memory was too much for the old lady. She broke down. Tom was snuffing now himself, and more pity for himself than anybody else he could hear. His cousin Mary crying and put a kindly word in for him. He began to have a nobler opinion of himself than ever before. Still, he was sufficiently touched by his aunt's grief to long rush out from under the bed and overwhelm her with joy at the theatrical gorgeousness of the thing appearing strongly to his nature too. But he just resisted and laid there quietly. He went on listening and gathering odds and ends in his conjecture at the first time the boys had drowned while taking a swim, and then the small raft missed. Next, certain boys said the missing lads had promised that the village should hear something soon, and the wise heads had put this and that together, and decided that the lads had gone off the raft and would turn up the next town below presently. But toward noon the raft had been found, lodged against the Missouri River, some 5 or 6 miles below. And then hope perished. They must be drowned, else hunger would have driven them home by now. It was believed that the search for the bodies had been fruitless effort, mainly because the drowning must have occurred in the mid-channel of the river, and since the boys, being good swimmers, would have otherwise escaped the shore. This was Wednesday night. If the bodies continued missing until Sunday, all hope would be lost, and the funerals would be preached on that morning. Tom shuddered. Joe Harper's mother gave a sobbing good night and turned to go. Then, with a natural impulse, the two bereaved women flung themselves into each other's arms and had a good, consoling cry, and then said good night. Aunt Polly was tender far beyond her wont, and her good night to Sid and Mary. Sid sniffed a bit, and Mary went off crying with all her heart. Aunt Polly knelt down and prayed for Tom so touchingly and so appealingly, and with such measures of love in her words and her old trembling voice, that even Tom was weltering in tears again, long before she was even through. He had come so long, and she went to bed, for she kept making broken-hearted ejaculations from time to time, tossing restfully and turning over, but at last she was still, only moaning just a little in her sleep. Tom stole out, rose gradually beside her bed, shaded the candlelight with his hand, and stood regarding her, his heart full of pity for his poor Aunt Polly. He took out some sycamore scroll and placed it on the candle, but something occurred to him, and he lingered considering. His face lighted with a happy solution of his thought. He put the bark hastily back in his pocket, and then he bent over and kissed his poor aunt on her faded lips, and straightway made his stealthy exit, latching the door behind him. He threaded his way back to the landing, found nobody there, walked boldly onto the boat. He knew there was a watchman who always turned in and slept like a graven image. He united the skiff and stern, slipped it out, and was soon rowing cautiously upstream. When he had pulled a mile above the village, he started quartering across and bent himself stoutly to his work. He hit the landing on the other side, for it was a familiar bit of work to him. He moved and captured the skiff, arguing it might be considered a ship, and therefore legitimately prayed for a pirate. But he knew, though, a search would be made, and it might end in revelations. So he stepped ashore and entered the woods. He sat down and took a long rest, torturing himself meantime to keep awake, and then started wearily down the home stretch. The night was far spent. It was a broad daylight before he found himself fairly abreast in the island bar. He rested until the sun was well up and gilding the great river with its splendor, and then he plunged into the stream. A little later he paused, dipping upon the threshold of the camp, and I heard Joe Harper say, "No, Tom's true blue, Huck. He'll be back. He won't desert us. He knows what would be a disgrace if a pirate deserted. And Tom's too proud for that sort of thing. He's up to something. I wonder what. Well, I tell you, the thing is ours anyway, ain't he?" "Pretty near, Huck, but not yet. The writing here says that they are, if he ain't, back here by breakfast." "Which he is!" as Tom exclaimed with a dramatic effect, stepping grandly back into the boys' camp. A sumptuous breakfast of bacon and fish was provided, and as the boys set up to work on it, Tom recounted and adorned his adventures. They were vain and boastful company of heroes. When the tale was done, Tom hid himself away in a shady nook to sleep till noon, and the other pirates got ready to fish and explore. So that's the end of chapter 15. Make sure you do tonight's questions. I want you to pay attention to a few things here. Tom has changed. Tom is what we call in literature a dynamic character. He's not going to stay the same throughout the whole book. He's going to change by leaps and bounds. Now, some of the other characters are flat characters that are just there to feed off of other characters, like maybe Joe Harper, for example. I'm not going to call Huck flat because he changes a little bit too throughout the story. But Becky and Amy and Aunt Polly, a lot of them, basically they stay pretty much the same. But Tom, he's going to change quite a bit. Yes, he stays his mischievous ways, but as you can see in this chapter, this is the first time he really feels bad about what he's been doing. He starts crying as he hides under the bed, listening to Aunt Polly pray for him, and they feel bad for him, thinking that he's dead. So if you guys have any questions, let me know. I'll be on the Google Meet. See you guys later.